Okay, we left off last week at letter C on the new outline with the healing of the daughter of a Syrophoenician woman. That's where we're going to start this morning. And that's a big word, I know, the Syrophoenician woman. If you have any maps in the back of your Bible, or you have an atlas of some sort that has maps that will help you with this, you can go and you can take a look on the western side of Canaan and Palestine in the northwest corner. And you might find the city of Tyre, Tyre. Well, if you're able to see that area, then you have a general idea of the area of Phoenicia. That would be the general area of Phoenicia. So that will help you out in geographical terms to understand a little bit about perhaps the location of this woman's ancestry. But anyway, this is the healing of the daughter of the Syrophoenician woman. She's not mentioned that way in Matthew's account, but I believe it is in Mark's account that we actually find that term being used. But someone, if you will, read for us Matthew 15, 22 through 18. Who will read that? Okay, Scott.
And behold, a woman of Canaan came out of the same coast, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. But he answered her not a word. And his disciples came and besought him, saying, Send her away, she cried after me. But he answered and said, I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, It is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to the dogs. And she said, Truth, Lord, the dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. And Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith, be it unto thee even as thou wilt. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour.
All right, thank you, Scott. Those of you who did not get a copy of this class outline that would like one, will you raise your hand now? Jim's has those ready. Okay, we need one up here, Jim, and one there. One more right here. Thank you again, Jim. Take a look at verse 21. I know we didn't read that today, but that was in the previous study. You'll see there it says that then Jesus went thence and departed into the coasts of Tyre and Sidon. Remember, I told you a few moments ago on your maps, if you could find the city of Tyre, Tyre, and notice that would be the Phoenician area. That helps you to understand, again, the landscape and the geographical area where Jesus was at this point in his earthly ministry. She's described in verse 22 as a woman of Canaan, which, of course, Canaan was used broadly for that general area of land over in the Middle East. She came out, it says, came out of the same coast, the coast there being the borders of Tyre and Sidon. That's where, again, that location is of her, where she was dwelling, and cried unto him, saying, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the devil. Is this a prayer? What was that? A plea? I heard something else too. What was the other thing? A petition. Okay, same thing. It's petition, plea, same idea. It's not a mercy. It's not a prayer. The reason I ask that is because if I were right there in the presence of Jesus, I could ask something of him. But I'm not to pray to him. As a matter of fact, we touched on that many times. He's taught that we are to pray to the Father. And therefore, when he was on earth now, if someone came to him, they certainly had the opportunity to petition him, plead to him for something to be done. On this occasion, she says, Have mercy on me, O Lord, thou son of David. My daughter is grievously vexed with the King James has a devil, but really the idea is a demon. Now, she says, Have mercy on me, but she really is wanting something done for her daughter. And a lot of times we are probably the same way. When one of our children or someone who's close to us is not doing well, they're having some form of difficulty, whether it be sickness or disease, we feel a lot of angst and we feel a lot of uncomfortableness, and a lot of times we unfortunately allow worry to creep into our lives, and we want the best to be for our family member or for our friend. Well, no doubt she loved her daughter very much, and she is concerned that her daughter is suffering the way that she is. Notice that she refers to him as Lord there. Now, that's not necessarily the way we always refer to the word Lord. Sometimes the word Lord was used the way we use the term Sir on occasion, especially when you go over to Acts chapter 9, 22 and 26, where you find Saul's conversion, where he talks to Jesus there, and he refers to him as Lord. He was meaning it as Sir there. But she does refer to Jesus here as thou son of David, and that is a very important reference in regard to the genealogy of the one who was to come to be the Christ. Open to Acts chapter 2 with us. When Peter stood up on that day of Pentecost, he preached the first gospel sermon in its entirety. That they had taken the Christ, that they had put him on a cross and killed him. He was buried, that he rose the same day, and God had made him both Lord and Christ. That's Acts 2:36. But if you'll notice, take a look there beginning at verse 29. Men and brethren, let me freely speak unto you of the patriarch David, that he is both dead and buried, and his sepulchre, that's a tomb, is with us unto this day. Therefore, being a prophet, and knowing that God had sworn an oath with an oath to him, that was to David, that of the fruit of his loins, that would be his descendant, according to the flesh, he would raise up Christ to sit on his throne. There would come a time where David's descendant would come into the world, and he would be the Christ who would reign over his kingdom. He, seeing this before, spake of the resurrection of Christ, that his soul was not left in hell, that's Hades, neither his flesh did see corruption. This Jesus hath God raised up, whereof we all are witnesses. Therefore, being by the right hand of God exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Holy Spirit, he hath shed forth this which ye now see and hear. For David is not ascended into the heavens, but he saith himself, the Lord said unto my Lord, sit thou on my right hand, until I make thy foes thy footstool. This was foretold long ago that Jesus, or the Christ, would be of the seed of David. So when she refers to him here as the son of David in Matthew 15:22, she's giving credence to her belief that indeed he's the fulfillment of prophecy. That this was the one who was to come, that he is indeed the Christ. Now, the idea of this devil or demon, we've talked about this in the past. There are unclean spirits that were allowed for the purpose of miracles to be performed, to confirm the word that was being proclaimed in the first century. We don't have that happening to us today. It does not affect us the way that it did back then. But nonetheless, the daughter of this woman is grievously, which again, that's an adverb to describe just how bad it was that she is vexed with this devil or demon. But notice his reaction in verse 23. But he answered her not a word. Have you ever read that and just kind of stopped for a moment and scratched your head, figuratively speaking, and why did he not answer her? Why did he stay quiet? I mean, here's a woman who's desperate. She's coming to him, acknowledges him, and begs for his help for her daughter, and yet Jesus says absolutely nothing. Was he being rude? Say that again.
He wanted everybody to be quiet and still, so they were waiting on him to speak.
Okay. Norma said that maybe the idea was he was wanting them to be quiet so that he could speak, but at this morning time he doesn't though. He doesn't speak, which is an interesting thing. He stays silent. I want to submit to you the possibility this morning that this is one of the greatest tests of a person's faith that you will ever find. When God is silent on a matter and how we handle it. Let me put it to you this way. Jesus can help this daughter instantaneously, right? Loves to help people, been doing it, not a problem there. He's not upset with someone coming to ask this of him. We've seen that many times over. Why then did he not immediately just do it? Let me ask you a question. Have you ever gone to God in prayer and you asked for something a certain way and it didn't happen the way you thought it would, or it didn't happen immediately as you thought it might? Have you ever had that happen? Anybody in here ever had that happen? Did it rock your faith, or did it cause you to stumble in some form or fashion because it didn't happen the way you thought it would? Or did you continue faithfully to trust in God that it would be taken care of the way He saw fit? Again, I would submit to us this morning that this may be one of the greatest tests of faith that a person can ever have, is when God is silent on a matter. But He's not going to remain that way. And His disciples came and besought Him, saying, "Send her away, for she crieth after us." Well, they are kind of an interesting discussion at this point. They look at some of these people who come to Him as a burden, as an irritant, as someone who is just being a distraction in His mission and in His work. So they want Him to send her away. But He answered and said, "I am not sent, but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Okay, that's another test. The first one there is not saying a word and seeing whether or not she would actually stay around perhaps and actually continue on trusting in Him, or would she leave and have nothing to do with Him. But she didn't leave, she didn't turn away, she passed that test of faith. Now Jesus is giving her another test. "I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel." Who's He talking about there? The lost sheep of the house of Israel. The Jews, that's right. His earthly ministry was primarily with the Jewish people. Now, there were other occasions where there were some that He encountered. I was talking to Alan a few moments ago about the Samaritan woman at the well. There are times where he encountered other people that were not Jews, but most of his primary work was amongst the Jewish people. That's who he was sent to at this point in time. And he's trying again, keep in mind, he's using this opportunity to determine this woman's faith and to use her as an example. This woman is still being used as an example of faith in 2022 right now. Think about that. She is still being used as a person who showed great faith even to this very hour. I am not sent but unto the lost sheep of the house of Israel. Well, I guess he's not going to help me. I guess I got to leave, right? Is that what she did? No, she answers and said, then came she and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. By the way, worship, again, is only to be reserved to God, correct? God is the only one who is to receive worship from man. If Jesus is not God in the flesh, then he would have been wrong to have accepted this from her. But he did. Help me. That's her plea. Help me. But he answered and said, he's going to test her again, it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. Now that, my friend, is a test again of this woman's faith as how much she's going to stay or leave or trust or fall. When he refers to the children's bread not being cast to dogs, he's talking about things that should be for the Jewish people and instead is being given to someone who wasn't a Jew. And he used the term dogs there. How would you like to hear that if you were in her shoes? I mean, that's pretty stern, isn't it? That's pretty firm. I mean, that sounds almost harsh. I'm not going to stick around and listen to this. She didn't leave. She stayed there. He tested her once by saying nothing. He tested her twice by saying that he wasn't come but to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. He tests her again by making it clear that it was not meet or good for him to take the children's bread and cast it to dogs. She didn't leave. Her faith is so strong that Jesus can heal her daughter, that he's the Christ, he's the Son of God, the seed of David. She's going nowhere. By the way, I'm going to preach on him being the Son of God this morning. And I want you to think about that when we go back to our study later on of that, how she reacted in your own personal study, remembering this this morning. And she said, truth, Lord. What he said is accurate. He didn't say anything wrong. By the way, there's a difference in people not liking what someone says and the person saying something wrong. There are big differences there. There are a lot of people that don't like when we say what needs to be said. Spiritually speaking especially, people don't like being told generally where they're wrong. They don't like to see where they're doing wrong. But on this occasion, Jesus said nothing wrong. He was firm. He tested her 3 times. But he was not wrong in what he said. She even acknowledges it. Truth, Lord. Yeah, you're right. It's not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs. It ought to be for the children. Well, here Jesus, his primary mission was not to Gentiles or to Samaritans, but primarily to Jews. And here's a woman of Tyre, the coast of Tyre and Sidon, a Syro-Phoenician woman wanting his help. And she said, truth, Lord. This woman was a wise woman. Yet the dogs eat of the crumbs which fall from their master's table. She's not asking for a whole lot, is she? She's not asking for anything that he can't do. Is that true? Does he have the power to heal her daughter immediately? Even though he's not sent to the Syro-Phoenician woman, even though he's not sent to Gentiles and Samaritans, if there was one that came up and they were trusting this way this woman is and are confident that he is the Christ, the Son of God, the seed of David, the way this woman is, who gets tested 3 different times and doesn't lose her faith during all of it, you know, there's nothing wrong with helping her out as well, is it? Because she's right. Even though it's not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it to dogs, the dogs do eat of the crumbs. There are the times where some of those blessings would just happen to fall down to someone else. And she's right to say that. And Jesus' response, and I love it, then Jesus answered and said unto her, O woman, great is thy faith. You talk about a woman who passed the test, she passed 3 of them. Silence, that she wasn't of the lost sheep of the house of Israel, and that it wasn't meet to cast the children's bread to dogs. She didn't give up. She didn't turn away. She didn't falter. Great is thy faith. Sometimes, friends, we may not get the reaction. We may not get the response that we think we should get from God. We should never doubt for one moment, though, that God doesn't care and that God doesn't see and hear. He does. He does. and to his children, he is going to be able to help. Now, this was not a Jew. This was, to use Jesus' terminology, typified as like being a dog, not of the Jews. Great is thy faith. Yes, sir.
I heard what a guy named Wood say here in her response to that, even the little puppies, if they eat the crumbs.
Oh, okay, all right. I like that. That's kind of good visual, isn't it? Even little puppies.
Well, it's in the modern literal listed that way. Yes. The modern literal says cast it to the little puppies. But you know, the crumbs from the table, you know, you give to the babies.
Right.
Puppies, sorry.
No, that's okay. I know what you're talking about. I understand what you're talking about. This woman is to be commended where some would have fallen. This woman is to be admired where some would have failed. Yes, sir.
I think she knew more about Jesus than most Jews did.
That's a very good point right there that Jim brings out. This woman is already referring to him as the Son of David. She's already worshiping him. There are multitudes of the Jews at this point in time who've not gotten to that point. So that's a great point, Jim. Her faith is stronger than a lot of the Jews. And Jesus acknowledges, great is thy faith. Now, what kind of faith do we have today? How strong is our faith? Would we pass those tests if they were presented to us in a similar fashion today? He says, be it unto thee even as thou wilt. All he wanted was her daughter to be healed, right? That's the devil, this demon. Jesus tests her 3 times. And by the way, this is another thing as well. There were people watching and listening to all this as well right around him, correct? Yes, primarily he's dealing with this woman, but if you remember verse 23, his disciples are telling him, send her away. They needed to learn something too, because guess what? Later on, these disciples are going to have to go to the Gentiles and the Samaritans, and they're going to have to help them. Think he was teaching a lesson there too? We're not sending her away. She passes the test. She's a person of faith. She is one that's going to be a person who we can teach and to develop and help. And her daughter was made whole from that very hour. Again, an immediacy of it, a true miracle. All right, that's Matthew 15, 22 through 28. Let's go to Mark's account. Mark chapter 7, verses 25 through 30. Very similar, with a little bit more information here.
I got it.
Okay, Jim. Mark 7, verses 25 through 30.
For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast out the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it's not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered him and said to him, yes, Lord, even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. And he said to her, for this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of your daughter.
In verse 30, please.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out, and her daughter was lying on the bed.
All right, thank you for the reading. I mentioned verse 21 in Matthew 15, talking about Tyre and Sidon. If you'll back up to verse 24 here in Mark 7, you'll see the same thing. And from thence he arose and went into the borders of Tyre and Sidon. I gave you that area of Phoenicia earlier, and where Tyre was located on the maps. She is given, or more information is given about her here. She is a Greek, which again means she's a Gentile. She is a Greek, a Syrophoenician by nation, or that was her birthplace. That was where she was from. Again, the same thing. She's very humble, coming to Jesus, falling at his feet, a sign again of humility. She, on this occasion, is like we studied earlier, wanting her daughter to be healed. Jesus, this time we only have the reference there of him saying, let the children first be filled, for it is not meet to take the children's bread and to cast it unto the dogs. Again, Jesus initially, his main priority was dealing with the Jews. But there were opportunities where along the way others could be blessed. And that's what's going to take place here. And she answered and said unto him, yes, Lord, yet the dogs under the table eat of the children's crumbs. Even they can benefit from something. And even this Greek woman, this Syrophoenician woman, even though she's not a Jew, she still can benefit from the blessings. And he said unto her, for this saying, go thy way. And again, the saying there, his faith in Christ. His confidence that she is continuing to come to him and not give up, not allow his test to cause her to fall. The devil is gone out of thy daughter, and when she was come to her house, she found the devil gone out, and her daughter laid upon the bed. And I can only imagine how much joy must have been in that home at that moment in time. Because up until this point, there had to be a lot of difficulty and angst and sorrow and wondering if it would ever be better. But now, thankfully, it is. All right, any questions on the healing of the daughter of a Syro-Phoenician woman? Or any comments that you'd like to make before we move on?
I'd like to ask a question.
Okay.
In the literal, it says she was from Canaan.
Right.
And the Jews intermarried against God's will with the people of Canaan.
At times, you're right. Yes,
I
ma'am.
think that possibly her knowledge came from that lineage.
I don't know.
If
But
there was something left, it's like the other people who intermingled.
right. I don't know for sure. Being in the Syro-Phoenician area, the Tyre and Sidon, she's very close to where the Jewish people are in regard to where she was born anyway. So the large part of that I would like to think is probably just the mere location and proximity of to where she was. Right, that she had a great deal of knowledge about the Jews and, of course, Christ being the son of David. But is it possible that it could have been part of that as well? What you were indicating, it could. I can't say for sure. But she definitely is one who had a great deal of a knowledge of the history of the Christ coming into the world. And as Jim, wait a minute, I think it was Jim that said it. Yes, Jim made the point that she has more faith at this point and she has more confidence in Jesus than some of the Jews did, which is an amazing thing. But I can't say for sure on the other. I'm not sure. Anything else? Yes, sir?
But she knew where the healing would come.
Yes, sir, she did.
Where she went.
That's a good point. Yeah, she was not going to let anything deter her. She knew from the evidence that had already been put out there of what Jesus had already been doing that her daughter could be healed, and she was not going to take no for an answer, basically. That determination is admirable. That when you are that confident in what you know that something can be done, or you trust that much, have that much faith, that you won't let anything deter you, that is extremely admirable. And she was not willing to leave without something being done for her daughter as best as she could get. So, great example to us of faith. All right, look at letter D on the outline as we move forward. It says, another time, avoiding Herod's territory. Now, when we're dealing with Herods, there were different Herods, and we need to understand that. Sometimes that term is thrown around and there are different ones. But when you go back to Matthew 15:29, you'll see what we're talking about, where it talks about avoiding time, or another time avoiding Herod's territory. He'd already left on one occasion and left that territory. He went into the area of Tyre and Sidon, the coast there. But this time, if you'll take a look, someone read Matthew 15:29.
Jesus departed from there, skirted the Sea of Galilee, and went up to the mountain and sat down.
All right, thank you for the reading. He leaves the area of Tyre and Sidon. I'm going to go back in my Bible to the maps in the back again. And if you're able to do that, I want you to take a look if you can. And you will see, if you have the Phoenician area in Jesus' ministry where Tyre is, and it's kind of up in the upper left-hand corner of Canaan, you'll look southeast of there, you'll see the Sea of Galilee. So that gives you the idea. He leaves that area of Tyre and Sidon and goes southeast back towards the Sea of Galilee. So just to give you a mindset again of his travels. The idea there, he came near the Sea of Galilee and went up into a mountain and sat there. This is not the only time our Lord would do such things. Even at times when our Lord was on this earth, it was good for him to have some time to decompress a little. Does that make sense? A little downtime every once in a while, a little refreshing every once in a while. He was human too. Absolutely. And he needed the same type of things that we do from time to time in regard to those aids in our lives. And Jesus, being a man who is constantly, or a lot of the time right now, being bombarded by all these different people wanting healings and such like, I'm sure that a little bit of time, a little bit of isolation every once in a while wasn't a bad thing for him. All right, back to Mark again. This is where Mark talks about him leaving or avoiding Herod's territory again. Mark chapter 7, someone read verse 31.
And again departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, came unto the Sea of Galilee, through the midst of the coast of Decapolis.
Okay, thank you very much. Again, departing from the coast of Tyre and Sidon, he leaves that general area and heads back toward the Sea of Galilee. And it talks about there about Decapolis. I'm trying to find here if I have a map that can help you understand where that is. Let's see. You may have one that says it that I don't have in mind. I'm not finding it on any of mine right there at that moment in time. But the general area, again, is he leaves the Tyre and Sidon area and comes southeast to the Sea of Galilee, but he goes through the midst of the coast, or the borders. That's what that means, the borders of Decapolis, which is an area that apparently he had to pass through on his way to the Sea of Galilee. All right, the next point, letter E. The healing of the deaf man with a speech impediment and the feeding of the 4,000. I'll tell you what, since we're there at Mark, let's just start there at Mark 7, verse 32, down through chapter 8, verse 9. That's a good segment of scriptures, but we're going to try to cover it together there. Mark 7, verses 32 through Mark chapter 8, verse 9. Okay, Jamie?
Then they brought to him the one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech. And they begged him to put his hand on him. He took him aside from the multitude, and he put his fingers in his ears, and he spat, and he touched his tongue. Then looking up to heaven, he sighed, and he said, Ephphatha, this is, be opened. Immediately his eyes were opened, and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. Then he commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, He has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak. In those days, the multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called to his disciples, and he said to them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now continued with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. And if I send them away, hungry to their own houses, they will faint on the way, for some of them have come from afar. His disciples answered him, How can one satisfy these people with bread here in the wilderness? And he asked them, How many loaves do you have? And they said 7. So he commanded the multitude to sit down on the ground. He took the 7 loaves and gave thanks, broke them, and gave them to his disciples to set before them. And they set them before the multitude. They also, having a few small fish, and having blessed them, he said to set them also before them. So they ate and were filled, and they took up 7 large baskets of leftover fragments. Now those who had eaten were about 4,000, and he sent them away immediately to go into the boat with his disciples, and came to the region of Dalmatia.
All right, thank you, sir. Mark's account gives us the information about the deaf man with a speech impediment in Mark chapter 7, beginning at verse 32. And then there's the feeding of the 4,000 in verses 8:1 down through verse 8:9. Let's back up there to the 32nd verse of chapter 7. And they bring unto him, someone is doing this. Now keep this in mind. This is being done by some individuals, and the people bringing him obviously knew of Jesus and knew of his abilities at this point in time. Whoever it was that's responsible for bringing this deaf man who had a speech impediment to Christ. And they beseech, that means beg. They literally begged Jesus to put his hand upon him. Remember when the woman had the issue of blood, what did she just want to touch the hem of the garment, right? She had enough faith that that was enough. And they have enough faith that if Jesus didn't really have to even put his hand on him. If he wanted to, he could have just spoken it. But they have confidence here that if Jesus were to do this, that this man's impairment would be healed and that he would not be this way anymore. When I read verse 33 and I let it sink in my mind, I kind of laugh a little, and I'll explain to you why in a moment. And he took him aside from the multitude, that's the man that had the speech impediment and was deaf, and put his fingers into his ears. Y'all don't find that funny? Come on. Think about that for a moment. Our Lord literally sticks his fingers in the ears of this man. Now, did he have to? No. But he does, and that's the way it happens, that he ends up putting his fingers into his ears, and he spit and touched his tongue. Did he have to do any of this? No, which makes me wonder as a curious person, why did he do it this way? I don't know all of it. I can't say for sure, but this is the way he chose to do it. Obviously, there is a benefit to the multitude seeing things done that might help them, and that might have been part of it. But to bind and say, I'm absolutely certain why he stuck his fingers into the man's ears, spat, and touched his tongue, I don't know. That's just the way Jesus decided to do it. You remember there was another time where he makes clay of spittle and he anoints a man's eyes that he could see. Remember that? Why did he do that? That's the way he chose to do it. I mean, he didn't have to do it this way. We've already seen he can perform a miracle just by speaking and it's done. But he does it anyway. And looking up to heaven, he sighed and saith unto him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. Well, what's being opened? The ears. And what's being loosed literally is going to be the tongue, his impediment. And straightway, again, the immediacy of the miracle, it's not something that took a long time, it was an immediate thing. And straightway his ears were opened, and the string of his tongue was loosed, and he spake plain.
Sir,
Yes, ma'am.
what you do not understand that when you have problems with your ear, you can hear, so you can speak. If you cannot hear, you cannot speak.
Well, you can, but it may be that it's not clear.
Yes, right.
Because you can't audibly hear the noise that's coming out. And that is true for a person who is deaf if they are able to speak, and some are, but their speech may not be as clear as someone else who could be able to hear what's coming out of their mouths. I find it interesting too, and this is me being curious again, what it must have been like. I don't know how long this man's been deaf, but just all of a sudden when you start hearing those things for the first time, could you imagine what it would be like for the first time to hear a bird tweet? For the very first time, or to hear a dog bark, or to hear a child cry or laugh. I mean, it would be an amazing thing when you've never seen or heard it, all this time, but now all of a sudden he can. And back to what Isabel was saying, and rightfully so, this impediment could have been partially because of his deafness. Now he's able to speak plain. If he wants to say certain words, he can say them just as plain as anyone else could. Yes.
Visual aid, perhaps.
Absolutely. I think that may be part of the reason why he did what he did the way he did. But I won't bind it necessarily to be the case, but I think it's a good point. That it is a great visual aid to those who are around and to help them be confident in what Jesus was able to do. He charged them that they should tell no man. Now, Jesus did this on occasion. He didn't want the people to go out and to spread it abroad. And there are different theories as to why Jesus did that. There are some people who think that they didn't want any more. That maybe he might not have wanted them to do such, because when you tell somebody not to do something, what's the first thing a lot of people do? Well, I don't know about that one, and I'm going to tell you why, because that would be disobeying the Lord. If he tells you to do something, then you do opposite of that, you're disobeying him. And I don't know that would be why he would do it, because I don't think he would want them to disobey him. Is it possible that he tells them to charges them to tell no man because he's already overcome with how many people are coming to him anyway? That's a possibility as well, that he has, basically his plate's already full, and it's hard to deal with everything he already is dealing with. I don't know. But whatever his main reason was, he doesn't want them going and telling any man at that moment in time. But the more he charged them, so much more, the more a great deal they published it. And it will spread. Things like this will. It's hard for some people to keep a secret sometimes, you know. I don't know if you've ever been in that position where somebody confided in you, and I want to talk to you. I need somebody to give me some advice, but I don't want it to go any further. It's hard sometimes not to when you're involved in situations like that, because somebody else might be involved too, and you have to stay silent to keep that person's trust. But they don't. What was that?
This was exciting to me.
Oh, sure. I would have been very excited.
Rejoice about.
Absolutely.
You want to share good things.
I agree with you, absolutely. If it's something good like this, that would be my natural reaction too, is I want to probably tell as many people as I can. But that was not the way he wanted them to do. But they did go out and they did spread it, and were beyond measure astonished, saying, He hath done all things well. Wouldn't that be nice to say of ourselves, that we've done all things well? I read that, and I stand here before you, and I'm telling you, I know that's not Corey Barnette, because there are times Corey doesn't do as well as he should. But the fact that they were able to acknowledge, yes, he hath done all things well, they find no fault in him at all. And they shouldn't. There is no fault in him. Nothing that he has done, nothing that he has taught, nothing that he is going to teach, none of this is wrong. He maketh both the deaf to hear and the dumb to speak. Now, later on, a great amount of multitude of Jews are going to turn against him. And there are already some at this point in time who are against him. But at this point, there are people backing him up, going out telling people he doeth all things well. And that's an important statement to understand in Jesus' earthly ministry, because that's going to affect other people. They're going to hear these other people saying that. They're going to develop an opinion one way or the other. Do I really think He's the Christ? Do I really think He's the Son of David? Do I really think He's the one that was to come? Well, He doeth all things well. And let me put it this way to you. If there were anyone who were to come any different than He, could they do any better than He did? No, and that was a great point too later on. That nobody could have done any better than He did. That should have been evidence enough to help these people to understand who was in their presence. But they failed many times over. All right, that's that's the healing of the deaf man with the speech impediment. Look at chapter 8 now, verses 1 through 9. This is the feeding of the 4,000. In those days, the multitude being very great. Again, that's what I was talking about earlier. He has his plate pretty full already. The multitude being very great and having nothing to eat, Jesus called His disciples unto Him and saith unto them, I have compassion on the multitude, because they have now been with me 3 days and have nothing to eat. This is obviously one of the great characteristics of our Lord, is the compassion He had for other people. He didn't always think of Himself. Isn't that refreshing in a time period where today a lot of folks think of self? And a lot of emphasis is placed on self by our society. Jesus did not always think of self. He was concerned about people around Him. They had been with Him 3 days and they had eaten nothing. Well, you go 3 days without a meal, you're probably pretty weak. You're probably to the point where a little nourishment would certainly be the ticket right now to help you to feel better. So Jesus went on and said, and if I send them away fasting to their own houses, they haven't eaten anything, I send them home, they will faint by the way. If you haven't had nourishment and you're that weak, it's very possible that, you could fall down and you could faint. You literally could be so weak that you fall out. And Jesus doesn't want that. They will faint by the way, for divers or diverse of them came from far. They're going to have to long travel home. And His disciples answered Him, from whence can a man satisfy these men with bread here in the wilderness? Do y'all remember another occasion very similar to this that we've already touched on? What was it? It was the feeding of the 5,000 with what? Okay, was that with women and children, right. But what was used to feed the 5,000? 5 loaves and 2 fishes. Enough for that boy, but maybe you had a little bit of a lunch, right? They ended up feeding everybody on that occasion and had 12 baskets full when it was over with, more than they started with. Why then, at this point in time, do the disciples still not have the confidence they should have that this is no problem for Jesus? And I'll let you think on that until next Sunday, because our time is exhausted. Any questions or comments before we stop? All right, thank you very much.